I saved a billionaire who had a sudden heart attack. He promised to fulfill one of my wishes. Everyone thought I would ask for his son to marry me. After all, I had liked him for 7 years. I hesitated for a long time. Can you give me some company shares? I want to use the dividends to hire a male model. Everyone was shocked. Seeing their reaction, I thought they wouldn't agree, so I quickly changed my mind. Or you can let me borrow your adopted son to play with, let me have a 2-month romance with him, then return him to you. There was still a dead silence at the scene. After a long time, the adopted son spoke up, paying a male model for you, but using me is just freeloading? I went to a fortune teller to predict my financial fortune recently, and she also took a look at my love fortune. She said with a smile that there might be a man coming into my life soon. I waved my hands in fear. I didn't want a man, I wanted money to spend. Can you come up with a solution for that? The fortune teller shook her head and reassured me that the quality of this potential man would be very high. In fact, I am sensitive and suspicious by nature, not suitable for love. I'm more suitable to be a king, in charge of the world's wealth. Most importantly, I fall in love easily, guaranteeing that I will treat all women equally. The fortune teller was speechless towards me and just let me be. After returning home, I was full of expectations for becoming rich. A week later, while strolling on the streets, my bag was snatched. My newly bought phone was inside. I ran after the thief but couldn't catch up. Instead, I ran into the billionaire who had a heart attack on the roadside. After taking him to the hospital, I learned that I had lost my bag while trying to save him. The billionaire's name was Richard. He was deeply moved and said he could grant me one wish. This got me all emotional. It was like having a magic lamp like Aladdin. Before I could say anything, I heard whispering nearby. Mark, could this be an opportunity for Emily to confess her feelings for you? Upon hearing this, the man nearby looked at me with a hint of disgust in his eyes. Are you an employee at our company? Richard's gaze also fell on me, and after a long look, he suddenly realized. It's you. The one who danced on stage at the annual party. During the company's annual party, I drew the lot to dance, which would earn me a reward. But everyone was well prepared. Those who went on stage before me showed off their singing skills, danced to the rhythm. Even the employee from our department who liked to be lazy, went on stage and performed a tap dance. I didn't have any outstanding talents to showcase, but I didn't want to give up the reward. So I came up with a bizarre dance that almost made everyone at the party sick. After that, I became even more famous in the company. Actually, I was quite famous at the company before because I liked the company's Prince Charming, Mark, since college, and had been chasing him. Later, the Prince Charming graduated and returned to the company, and I did my best to interview and get into his department. From college till now, this backup has been a full 7 years. After dancing at the annual party, my reputation went from being a backup to a slightly crazy backup. Surprisingly, Richard had also heard of my name. After giving me a once-over, he spoke gently. Have you decided? What wish do you want? Everything is possible. I glanced at Mark and noticed that he was already clenching his fists. Before I could finish speaking, the door of the ward suddenly swung open. Dad, I heard you were sick, so I came to see you. A slender and elegant man walked in, and the moment I saw him, my breath hitched. Such a beautiful face. Delicate features, high nose bridge, a cold and distant demeanor. When our eyes met, he gave me a faint smile, the dimples at the corners of his mouth appearing. I was dumbfounded. Compared to him, Mark's looks paled a bit. Richard introduced him very affectionately. This is my adopted son, Ken. I had heard of this title before, the vice president of the company. He had been handling business at a subsidiary before suddenly being transferred back this year. How come no one mentioned that he was this good-looking? What do you think, Emily? Have you thought of your wish? After much hesitation, I tentatively asked, could you give me a bit of company shares? Everyone present was stunned, especially Mark, who quickly interrupted me. Do you know what you're saying? Do they think I'm greedy for the company or something? I immediately defended myself, just a little bit. Give me some dividend every year, so I can afford to keep a male model. This way, I'll have money and men and reach the pinnacle of life. My shocking words probably stunned everyone, as they all stared at me wide-eyed. Ken even accidentally knocked over his water glass, startling everyone. Sorry for my outburst. He quickly righted the glass, and everyone regained their composure from their surprise, looking at me again. Richard asked me, "Are you sure?" I looked at Ken. His hand was stained with water, the back of his fair hand glistening. There were napkins nearby, but he raised his hand and licked the water off his hand directly, his eyes locked on me. In that moment, when our eyes met, I thought I saw a smile on his face, but it quickly disappeared. I couldn't even be sure if it was a figment of my imagination. But I was certain of one thing: he had captivated my heart. Or you can let me borrow your adopted son to play with. Oh no, let me have a 2-month romantic relationship with him, then return him to you. Emily, have you gone insane? This time, Mark shouted at me even louder. Richard, being used to such situations, quickly regained his composure after the surprise and asked Ken for his opinion. Ken remained silent for a while before speaking softly. Why do you have to pay for a male model but expect to freeload on me? In that case, I can transfer you some money. I make $6,000 a month, how much do you think I should transfer to you? That's too little, you'd better keep it for yourself, I agree. This time, it was my turn to be shocked. I was just speaking casually, but he agreed just like that, and even took out his phone directly, saying he wanted to exchange contact information. Richard looked dumbfounded for a while before nodding. Okay, Ken, you treat her well, he said. Yes, father, Ken replied, giving me his contact information. I noticed his profile picture. Mine was a shadow selfie of myself in the sunlight. Ken's photo was also a shadow in the sunlight, and what's even more coincidental is that the location, angle of the shot, and even the light and shadow composition were exactly the same as Mineas. We were leaving the hospital. Ken offered to give me a ride. He went to the parking lot first while I stood at the hospital entrance, lost in thought watching the shadows on the ground. I heard footsteps behind me, and a shadow loomed over my head. Emily, what did you mean just now? Mark surprisingly chased after me and confronted me, staring at me fiercely as if trying to bore a hole through me. He had been following me around like a shadow before, so why suddenly change his tune and deliberately put on a show in front of me, just to get my attention? I looked him in the eye and calmly said, Mark, do you know what you look like right now? It's like me trying so hard to get concert tickets but failing, then loudly claiming not to care. It's really uncanny. What are you saying? I don't understand. I just want to warn you not to have any other intentions towards me. I will not be with you. I casually replied and hopped into Ken's car, driving away directly. On Monday when I got to work, the manager as usual dumped a pile of files in front of me to handle. These all need to be resolved quickly, and I'll speak highly of you in front of Mark, he said. These tasks were actually the manager's responsibility, but he liked to pass them all to me to complete. Since the manager was someone who Mark had promoted, I had been doing these trivial tasks for him in hope of getting him to help me out more. No, you can handle these things yourself, I said, directly throwing the files back onto the manager's desk, which left him wide-eyed. Emily, do you know what you're doing? Now you're not even listening to me? I know. In our department, we have a manager like you, a few cronies, and a few yes men. Passing everything to me, at such a young age, it feels like I'm already a slave. I've decided not to do anything extra in the future, so the manager kept looking over here all day. As the evening approached towards the end of the workday, he came to my side again, this time with a much softer tone. Emily, I really have no other choice. Mark said he needs me to go out for drinks with him tonight. Can you handle these tasks for me now? I'll make sure to take you with me next time we go drinking. No, I have a date later, I said. Hearing this, the manager burst out laughing. What a joke, you're not chasing Mark anymore. Are you serious? And who are you going on a date with? Who would agree? Hello, Ken. The manager suddenly changed his tone, respectfully greeting Ken as I turned around to find him standing at the entrance of our office. She's going on a date with me. Any other questions? She can leave now, Ken said. The manager looked frightened, nodding repeatedly. I followed Ken out of the office, feeling a sense of satisfaction as if the underdog had won. Inside the elevator, he took out his phone and asked me what I wanted for dinner. Are we going together? I asked. Otherwise, am I going for the date alone? Ken's calm response left me speechless. Even when he asked for my home address the previous night, and waited specifically outside my building this morning to give me a lift to work, he was so natural about it all. Compared to him casually dropping me off at the company building, my furtive behavior when getting out of the car seemed overly sneaky. As the elevator moved, it suddenly stopped at the 18th floor. Mark's office was on this floor. Due to my frequent excuses to visit the 18th floor, the number was very sensitive to me and I unconsciously clenched my fists. Even though we were on this floor, there was no guarantee we would run into him. I comforted myself, unaware that Ken had suddenly leaned in closer to me. "You smell so good today," he said suddenly, leaning in to kiss me gently in the corner. The next second, the elevator door opened, and Mark just stepped in, witnessing the scene. "You guys." Ken had a faint scent of mint on him, a clean and refreshing smell. I seemed to have smelled it somewhere before, but before I could think about it further, he had let me go. Mark froze in place upon seeing the scene unfold. "What are you guys doing?" "This is at the company." Ken shielded me with him and calmly said, "It's after work hours now." The elevator door wouldn't close, beeping incessantly. As Mark stepped out of the elevator just before the doors closed, I heard him grit his teeth. "Emily, you're really ruthless." I was bewildered. What did I have to do with this? I looked at Ken, about to question him, but he had already lowered his eyes, looking somewhat dejected. "Are we not dating? Or do you actually not like me at all, just using me to irritate Mark? So what am I to you?" Feeling helpless, I sighed softly and decided not to pursue the topic further. Ken chuckled and reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The touch of his ice-cold fingertips on the skin behind my ear sent a shiver down my spine. "Your perfume smells really good," he said, leaning in again. I pulled out something from my bag and shoved it into his hands. "If you like it, take it. In the middle of summer like this, it's not easy to avoid mosquito bites. I just can't understand how a bottle of mosquito repellent can captivate someone like Ken." Looking at the mosquito repellent in his hand, Ken's expression was somewhat complicated, hesitating before speaking softly, "You really don't get it." The next day, I received an email from the company stating that I was temporarily assigned to work with Mark. Over the past year, Mark had established his own brand series, and it had recently entered the promotional phase, needing a lot of manpower. Several people were transferred from other departments to assist as Mark needed. I applied several times and got rejected, but now that the dream job opportunity is right in front of me, I feel complicated. As I arrived on the 18th floor, Mark walked out of the office, met my gaze, and smirked at me. "Just short-handed, don't think too much. I'm just here to help out, but the problem is, Mark has a brand launch live stream in a while. Due to this, everyone in the project team is busy. The colleague who assigned me tasks told me he hasn't had normal off-duty time for half a month now." I had a bad feeling. Like clockwork, as the end of work approached, Mark piled on more tasks for everyone, and we dare not utter a word of complaint. Ken couldn't find me in my department and came straight to the 18th floor. As soon as he stepped out of the elevator, I felt the air chill a few degrees. "We were supposed to go see a movie together today." He walked up to me, about to shut down my computer, when Mark emerged from the office. "She still has work to do tonight." Ken didn't argue with him, but instead he just held my hand. "Do you want to leave with me? We were supposed to go see a movie today." Mark's threatening voice immediately chimed in, "Emily, remember who you're working with now. Do you still want your bonus this month?" I fell silent for a moment and softly said, "Why don't you both make an offer? I'll see who's offering more." Eventually, Ken left first because he received an important phone call. As he left, he glanced back at me longingly, taking 3 steps and turning back, his handsome face filled with a sense of injustice. I admit my heart was already swayed. "Emily, what are you thinking?" Mark's voice rang out behind me, glaring at me intently, holding the document I had just printed. Absent-mindedly, the paper was printed crooked. "Don't try to provoke me with Ken. I called you over purely for work reasons, don't overthink it. I nodded and forced a smile. Don't worry, I no longer like you. I did like you for 7 years, but I really don't like you anymore. After realizing I didn't like Mark, I immediately wanted to get far away from him. Mark suddenly clenched his fists, crumpling the paper in his hand. It's probably for the best. With that, he dropped the paper and left. I was assigned to deliver something on the 3rd floor, where the new product launch event would be held in a few days. The stage was set up with the props for the new products, including a huge champagne tower. It stood 2 meters high and had apparently taken a whole day to set up. Just as I was about to leave after placing the item, I suddenly heard a familiar voice. Ken was standing in the corner, seemingly on a phone call. Is everything set up on the media side? Hurry up. I'll handle these things, you just ensure everything goes smoothly. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, bathed in the sunset light, outlining his tall figure. Ken's gaze inadvertently fell on the champagne tower, and his previously calm face suddenly flashed a hint of hostility. He smoothly walked up to the tower, still talking on the phone, and reached out his hand. With a gentle touch, one of the glasses on the champagne tower moved slightly. The next moment, the 2-meter-high structure crumbled instantly, glass shattering on the floor, startling everyone present. Ken hung up the phone, then faced his hurried colleagues, explaining softly, "Sorry, it was an accident. I'll have it taken care of." With those words, he turned to leave but bumped into me standing at the doorway. At that moment, I distinctly saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. The toppling of the champagne tower enraged Mark. Perhaps it was because he had poured his heart and soul into this brand series and couldn't afford any mishaps. Soon, rumors spread around the company that Mark had physically confronted Ken because of this incident. Hearing this gossip, my hand holding the coffee cup froze. Ken really didn't come to the office today. He had even messaged me in the morning, saying he couldn't pick me up for work recently. After all, Mark cared deeply about his brand series, so it was normal for him to be upset. But it was just a prop, and hadn't they found a replacement for Ken? They were still brothers. Without a blood relation, what kind of brothers were they? Everyone knew the younger brother had been adopted, and half of the family fortune would have to be divided. Who would willingly accept that? Colleagues whispered in the pantry, and after hesitating for a while, I finally sent a message to Ken to inquire about the situation. I heard you and Mark had a clash. Are you okay? It's fine, I'm used to it. That only furrowed my brows even more. Back in college, Mark had once gotten into a physical altercation on the field after losing a match, sending the opposing player to the hospital. For that reason, many criticized his unstable emotions, and my roommates had advised me not to like him, but I persisted for some reason. Show me. During lunch break, I sneaked into the fire escape and video called Ken. The call was quickly answered, and as soon as I saw the bruise under his left eye, curses were already swirling on my tongue. Why the face? Couldn't you have hit somewhere else? It's okay, already applied some medicine, we'll be fine in a few days. I'm glad you called, can I have calls from you? I feel happy. He leaned back against the headboard, wearing only a sleeveless shirt, revealing his sturdy arm muscles. I looked away silently, arguing with myself. I am genuinely concerned about you. Recently, due to overtime work, our chat time has only been limited to video calls before bedtime. Initially, Ken would only show his face on camera. Aren't you with me because of my face? It's okay, my face is a part of me. As long as you like it, that's enough. Until one day, he, in front of the camera, took off his suit jacket and loosened his tie. I watched the veins on his hand and the collarbones below the unbuttoned shirt, feeling a surge of desire. Ken noticed my expression and boldly unbuttoned his shirt to show off his body. Do you like it? If you do, I'll show it to you from now on. Since then, every time we video called, he would treat me to something special. I felt like I was getting a great deal in this relationship. Today, with a rare moment of free time at home, I did 2 sets of chest exercises. My heart raced as I watched the man in the screen take off his shirt, and my eyes were glued to the screen. The door in the stairwell suddenly slammed open, bringing me back to reality. My finger accidentally touched the screen, ending the video call. "What are you doing?" Mark stood in front of me, backlit so I couldn't see his face clearly but could feel the chill emanating from him. "Skipping lunch. How will you have time to deal with work in the afternoon?" "If you're really that free, I can arrange more tasks for you, Mark. How I spend my lunch break should be my own decision." I stood up, dusted off my pants, ready to leave, but Mark blocked my way. "You're not starting to like him, are you? Everyone in the company knew how hard you pursued me initially, but now you just want to walk away?" He continued, "And do you think Ken is such a good guy?" I turned to look at Mark, seeing his condescending tone. I couldn't help but smirk. "If you care so much about us, have you let your guard down?" After all, since Ken returned, many in the company believed his abilities were better than Mark's. Managing the branch so efficiently, achieving high performance, and now being assigned to the head office, suggested he was being groomed as the successor by the chairman. That's why Mark cared so much about the launch of this new brand series. This was his best way to prove himself. It's just that on the day of the new product launch event, disaster struck unexpectedly because it was a live broadcast and there were many media representatives present. Everyone was cautious. But due to a moment of negligence by the security, a woman managed to slip in. "Mark, you used me before, then lied to me about being responsible for me. Is this how you treat me?" With everyone's attention drawn, the woman defiantly revealed her story. When she lifted the child in her arms, the resemblance to Mark was undeniable. Facing the media cameras fearlessly, she loudly exposed him. "A year ago, Mark took advantage of me while I was drunk. When I got pregnant, he promised to take responsibility for me and the child, but this year, he started disappearing frequently. Today, I will expose your true colors in front of everyone." Mark's face turned pale as he urgently signaled the security to remove her. Seeing the child, even the security guards hesitated to push her away. With the situation in a stalemate, the woman continued her revelations. "A year ago, he took me out for drinks, got me drunk, and said if I didn't agree, he wouldn't give me full-time employment. I had just graduated for less than 2 years at that time. Because I believed him, I became a single mother, and my life was ruined." A crowd quickly gathered in the live stream, and comments flooded the screen. Mark quickly shut down the broadcast, shouting to have the woman removed. But it was too late to salvage the situation. The video was already circulating online, and even the company was abuzz with discussions. I had learned about this incident 2 months ago. From that moment, any affection I had for him had evaporated, and it confirmed that he was not the person I was looking for. After the incident, the company's senior management held an emergency meeting, and immediately contacted the media in an attempt to prevent a scandal. But some onlookers had already leaked videos online to mock him. As a result of Mark's personal image being tarnished, despite his years of effort preparing for the new series, all went down the drain after much deliberation. The executives couldn't come up with a solution, but everyone agreed that the project was a failure. The project team disbanded instantly, rendering Mark's assurances useless. That evening, I left work on time for once. Ken messaged me, saying he was waiting at the door to drive me home. As I got into the car, Ken unexpectedly turned on the car's Bluetooth, playing some music. At a red light, I couldn't help but ask, "Feeling really good today? Were you behind what happened today? If I say yes, would you dislike me?" Ken met my gaze, nervously awaiting my response. His palms were sweating from the tension, fingers fidgeting together. I had liked Mark for 7 years, ever since we started college. I had hoped for a wonderful college life, but reality was far from my expectations, struggling with academic pressures and the high cost of living in a big city. Mark was quite famous at school, coming from a wealthy family and being good-looking, naturally attractive to many. Initially, I just admired him, until one day when my part-time job and coursework left me with low blood sugar and a high fever, causing me to pass out on the street. In a daze, I felt someone pick me up and take me to the hospital. As I regained consciousness, the person had just left, leaving behind various hot foods and a beautifully wrapped bouquet of flowers. They did a good deed without leaving a name, only leaving me with a sentence. "Spring is coming, bad things will pass." Before the nurse came in to change my bandages, she teasingly asked, Your boyfriend was so worried when he brought you in, running all sweaty. Is he gone now? I couldn't answer and just awkwardly smiled as the nurse noticed the person leaving downstairs. They're down there, probably going to get you something. Struggling to sit up to see my rescuer, all I saw was their back heading straight to a car. But that car was familiar to me. It was Mark's family car. He had arrived at school in this car more than once. Initially, I just wanted to thank him for taking me to the hospital, but somehow everyone started inexplicably assuming I liked him. After hearing it so many times, even I started to develop feelings for him. This inexplicable relationship lasted for 7 years. Several times during this period I would snap out of it and think he was just ordinary, but I always remembered his act of kindness. Until 2 months ago, I overheard him talking to someone next to him when I went to deliver some documents. The woman actually went ahead and had the baby. If my dad finds out, he'll definitely kill me. When I slept with her, she acted all pure and virtuous. She hesitated to join us for a drink even when invited. I just said I could take responsibility lightly. Otherwise, she would definitely come causing a scene at the company. Who knew she was so despicable, actually having the baby? She looks pretty average, not as beautiful as Emily. I only found her figure attractive. At that moment, I felt disgusted and started to doubt if I had been blind all these years to like someone like her. All the feelings disappeared in an instant. Today's scandal being exposed, I just watched the show with a detached attitude. Watching his years of pretense being unveiled, watching his hypocritical appearance revealed in front of everyone. What does his business have to do with me? As the red light turned green, Ken started the car again, humming along with the music, looking very pleased. I observed his profile, once again impressed by the greatness of that face. Have we met somewhere before? If I had seen such a handsome face, I shouldn't have forgotten, but there was no impression in my mind, just a strange feeling of familiarity. Not remembering is better, after all, that time wasn't a decent memory. After dinner, we took a walk along the river bank together. The cold night wind blew on us. Ken held my hand tightly, continuously passing warmth to my palm. Halfway through, I suddenly stopped. This place, I participated in a competition here before. Walking down this road, there was actually someone who wanted to jump into the river. I remember it quite vividly. It was when I just started high school, following the teachers to participate in the competition. Sneaking out of the hotel at night, hesitating for a long time, I only managed to buy a sausage to nibble on the roadside because I was reluctant to spend money. I met a person by the river who had half of his body out. But I didn't initially think he wanted to end his life. I went over to him to look at the rushing river below, curiously asking, "What are you looking at?" He was about the same age as me, wearing a washed-out denim jacket, and in a low voice, he said while looking at the swift flow below, "I'm planning to jump down." His voice was hoarse, as if he had just been crying. I was startled and grabbed his hand tightly. "Please don't jump, there's just the two of us nearby. If I report to the police, they will list me as the prime suspect. Most importantly, I have an exam tomorrow and I don't have time to come back for interrogation." "It's okay, you don't have to report it. No one cares about my life or death. Even if I go missing, no one will care." "Who says that? At least I care now. If you jump into the river and pollute it, the environmental inspectors will care. Also, I don't remember why he wanted to jump into the river. What if he was pressured by his parents to do it? If I mention it, wouldn't it be like deliberately poking at his wound?" After much thought, I handed him my only sausage. "Have something to eat. Even if you are really going on your way, you should eat your fill first." He hesitated for a long time but eventually reached out towards me, softly saying thank you. "Really, eat it, this is my only one." Feeling devastated, I still handed him my only sausage. In the dim moonlight, with a duckbill hat on, I couldn't see his face clearly, but I noticed the bruise on the corner of his mouth, with traces of blood seeping out. Later, after much convincing and coaxing from me, he finally gave up the idea of jumping into the river. Now, looking back, I feel quite proud of myself. However, 10 years have passed, the bridge has been renovated countless times, and I can no longer pinpoint the exact location. But recalling this incident, I still feel a sense of satisfaction. After telling Ken this story, he remained stunned in place. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Ken looked down at me, the evening breeze tousled his hair. I looked at his delicate chin, memories suddenly overlapped. He looked at me and tears suddenly fell from the corners of his eyes. The next moment, he leaned down to cover me, a bitter tearful kiss containing endless emotions. I felt like I was dragged back to that winter night 10 years ago, to that injured person who was too disappointed with the world and ready to end it all. The moment I pulled him back from the riverbank, I felt life growing again. This kiss also fueled the wild growth of emotions, a bud sprouting wildly in my heart. That sausage tasted really good. Ken gently released me, wiping away the tears rolling down my face. I looked into his eyes, seeing my reflection in them. "Were you the one who took me to the hospital?" The familiar scent of mint, the person who took me to the hospital years ago had the same scent. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I didn't even properly thank him." "You don't need to thank me, because you also once pulled me out of the abyss." On the way back, I asked Ken how he became Richard's foster son. His pace noticeably slowed, and he forced a bitter smile. "My dad was his driver. That rainy day, he insisted on going to meet a client, had an accident on the way. My dad turned the car around to protect him. He only suffered minor injuries, but my dad died on the spot." Ken's mother was heartbroken upon hearing this news. Already in poor health, she fell down upon hearing the tragic news and never got up again. So, Ken was then adopted by Richard. But to make Mark feel better, Richard never cared about Ken. His life with Richard wasn't much different from before, staying in the maid's room, needing to do everything himself. Mark would sometimes use him as an outlet for his frustrations. Having gotten used to being covered in wounds, he would say it was me who injured him if asked, that I pushed him down the stairs, pushed him into the pool. Then, the only thing I could do was endure it without resistance. Because the consequences of resistance were too severe, Ken could only suffer in silence growing up. All I wanted was to escape, but more than that, I wanted to find you and appear in front of you in a better light. Ken laughed lightly and intertwined his fingers with mine. "Don't leave me behind, okay? I only have you now." He leaned closer to me, crouching down, rubbing his head in my neck's nape. "Please, I beg you." My heart was pounding, knowing that I was totally being manipulated. Ken was even more clingy than I had imagined, bombarding me with messages even during working hours in the same company. Every time I wanted to check my phone or slack off, would see messages from him. When the company arranged for him to go on a business trip, this guy got so anxious that he was crying in bed alone the night before leaving. The scandal involving Mark kept escalating online, with people digging up all kinds of dark histories about him. The company's reputation kept deteriorating, prompting Richard to come down to the office and give everyone a good scolding. To salvage the situation, Richard reached out to a top media company in hopes of controlling the public opinion. The person who came was the boss's daughter, and surprisingly, she took a liking to Ken at first glance in the elevator. By that afternoon, gossip about this had spread throughout the entire company. Upon learning about Ken's background, the boss's daughter immediately demanded that he break up with me and be with her instead. Ken's response was shocking. "Is your brain just a decoration? How can you say something so brainless?" The boss's daughter had never heard such words and ended up directly berating Ken in the office. Ken called the police to remove her. Thus, when Richard was preparing to discuss matters with her, he found out that she had already been taken to the police station. Towards the end of the workday, a man knocked on our office door. "Emily, Richard wants to see you." I followed him to the top floor conference room. In the vast conference room, only Richard was seated, the atmosphere oppressively tense. Ever since I learned about Ken's traumatic past, I suddenly felt that Richard's amiable exterior was all a facade. "I haven't properly thanked you for saving me. I can't offer you shares, but," he pushed a check across the table. "There's money, and I hear you're talented. There's a fully funded study abroad opportunity in the company. Would you like to give it a try?" Richard tapped the check on the table and stated firmly, "This is a great opportunity. Dating is just a game, the company values you now. Does Ken know about this?" Richard's smile immediately vanished. 500,000 is the starting point in novels, right? Why is Richard so stingy with just 50,000? Do you think Ken will love you forever? Maybe he's infatuated with you now, but I know this kid, he'll cool off soon. You're not planning to marry him off, are you? Just to clean up Mark's mess? This kid never disobeys Maine. The next moment, Ken pushed open the office door. Sorry to disappoint you this time. How come you're here? Didn't I ask you to take Lucy out for a meal to apologize? Ken replied, I told her I never want to see her again in my life, and that my girlfriend and I are happy together. Lucy was so moved, she said she will never collaborate with our company again. Richard was trembling with anger, unable to speak. Please take care of yourself, I might not be able to rush you to the hospital this time. You too. Ken, don't forget who made you what you are today. Without me, you are nothing. Ken took off his ID badge and placed it on the table, his gesture implicit. I've raised you for so many years for nothing. Ken left the company with me. As we got into the car, I was still thinking about the check. 50,000 was better than nothing. We could pretend to break up, take the money, and let the capitalist see the ugly side of human nature. But before I could finish my sentence, Ken gripped my face. Am I not worth more than 50,000? The next day, my bank account received $1 million. Ken was in a suit tying his tie in front of a mirror. You transferred money to me? Let me show you, I can create many more 50,000s for you. With a kiss on my lips, he got up and left. He had already planned his own way out, which explained why he could leave so confidently. Ken resigned on his own, and of course, I couldn't stay. Shortly after, I was fired. But receiving a substantial severance package was not bad. Especially since I had already found a new job, I was about to resign on my own initiative. I didn't expect such a good opportunity to be served on a platter. Ken started his own company, gearing up to make big moves, and I quickly reported to the new company. The atmosphere in the new company was harmonious, and during lunch, everyone was chatting about gossip when suddenly Mark's name came up. A good person, and things turned out like this. Who had an accident? I immediately leaned in to eavesdrop. That guy named Mark, the Playboy Prince, remember how he slept with an intern? She got pregnant, now he wants the child back, but doesn't want to take responsibility. On his way to snatch the child, he got into a car accident and will probably end up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. I couldn't help but sigh, and the next moment someone revealed even bigger news. His dad, Richard, seems to have found out about this, couldn't handle it, his heart gave out, and he's gone. A series of bombshell news left me stunned. In just half a year, unexpected events unfolded, leaving everyone unable to react. But ultimately, I was just a spectator, like everyone else, turning this into a topic over tea and dinner. Ken messaged me, asking what I wanted for dinner. I immediately started browsing my phone to order. In the end, their affairs had nothing to do with me. I just needed to cherish the people around me. That's all there was to it. Ken's epilogue, used to not resisting, not striking back. Because I knew it was all in vain. No one will step forward to help oneself, and Mark's words will often echo in my ears. Your father was our driver. If he hadn't died, would you have had the chance to live in my house? You are really lucky, one father dies, and you can immediately exchange for a new one. My dad is much richer than yours. Obviously, all he wanted was his own father. Ken secretly kept a dog in the yard, his only friend. It was the only living creature that listened to him after his parents passed away. Recently, the girl Mark was interested in suddenly handed Ken a love letter. When Ken returned home, he found his room in a mess, with walls graffitied with insults, his bed soaked in an unknown liquid, emitting a foul smell. Mark was standing upstairs, looking down at him, saying, I did it, what are you gonna do about it? His patience seemed to have not paid off in the end, even the little dog died. He searched the yard but couldn't find it. Finally, he found the peeled skin of the dog in his bed. Mark's voice came from behind, like it? It's my gift to you. By the way, did you enjoy the soup tonight? Too bad the dog was too skinny, only enough for a small bowl. I was generous, so I let you have it. Feeling nauseous, Ken used all his strength to swing his fists and fight with Mark. In the dark of night, he left that home alone, wounded. He stood by the river. All it would take was to jump, and everything would end. He closed his eyes, felt the wind against his body, his weight shifting towards the abyss, when someone grabbed his hand. He couldn't help but shudder. What are you looking at? Let me see too. I'll jump in. It was a girl in a school uniform, holding a sausage in one hand. Her eyes widened when she heard he wanted to jump in, and she started rambling about irrelevant things. She even gave him the sausage she had been holding. So many delicious things in the world, don't you want to try some? I heard that beautiful flowers bloom by the roadside in spring, have you seen them? What color are they? She talked a lot to him, and when he wasn't paying attention, she somehow managed to pull him back in. He didn't understand how such a small and frail girl could have such strength. They lay on the roadside, she panting heavily, still murmuring. The water must be very cold in winter, maybe you should wait until spring when the water is warmer, and take a look at the spring flowers. He listened to her words like a warm ray, finally feeling a hint of brightness in his barren heart. As an adult, Richard wanted to send him abroad, perhaps with the intention of never meeting again. When he struggled abroad, he would think of her words. He never imagined their reunion would be under these circumstances. She fainted on the roadside, and the roles of rescuer and rescued were reversed. He should have waited for her to wake up, but due to malnutrition and irregular sleep habits from being abroad for long, his body had become frighteningly thin, far from looking good. This time he returned home to handle the affairs of a branch company while studying abroad. Perhaps recognizing his abilities, he was allowed to return home. Mark was still living recklessly, which infuriated him. He smashed a bottle on Mark's head. He still had scars on his face. If possible, he hoped to appear in front of her in a better light. He used all resources, monitoring her whereabouts. He visited the restaurants she had been to, looked at the scenery she had seen. When he became better, more excellent, he would stand proudly by her side. He left in a hurry, leaving a bouquet of flowers for her. Promised, spring flowers.